Welcome to Agriculture Science 465, a class taught at Montana State University by Florence Dunkel. For this week, the class read the book The White Man's Burden by W. Easterly.
All right. The White Man's Burden is, what's the rest of the title there, CJ, on White Man's Burden?
Why the West's efforts to aid the rest have done so much ill.
And Easterly?
Yeah, he's a professor at New York University.
He's an economist. Now, there's a couple parts to his background.
He's been visiting Ghana since he was 12 with his father on poverty programs.
Right. Mm-hmm. He lived there. One other thing about his career, 16 years.
Historically, countries in Africa, different countries in Africa.
Right, and I think it's more than Africa, actually, Latin America and Russia as well. He was a World Bank economist.
It's interesting, one of the things that he mentions that I think would be helpful is more road access in certain remote areas so that they could get their products to market. In India, they have this road there in the remote area, they call it the World Bank Road because the World Bank financed its entire building of it. So
I know it has those names. There's a road in Rwanda called the Chinese Road. And then there's the roads that people say, oh yeah, look out the window, that's the World Bank Road, and there's no road. So what are these tragedies? What are the tragedies that he opens his book with?
Well, I wasn't sure if I interpreted the first tragedy correctly, but I believe it was disease.
Now the second tragedy.
Oh, I thought the second tragedy was foreign aid administration.
It's the gap. Remember, did I give you the first day a nice little pin-up to put on your bulletin board about the gap? Remember the gap? What is his solution to those two tragedies?
You're looking at the searcher as opposed to a planner.
You're going to have the planners and the searchers.
Someone who starts with a model that may or may not work in their own place and then tries to apply it directly to a region.
Applies a plan remotely.
Yes, from distance, yeah, sorry.
Okay, all right. What's the contrast to that?
The searcher
Yes, searcher.
is someone who has experience on the ground in a place and looks for what a community and what an area needs before conceiving of like how they can help out.
So he or she, and listens.
My favorite thing that he said was, a searcher knows only insiders have enough knowledge to find solutions and that solutions are homegrown. And another thing in contrast is a planner, he said, determines what to supply and a searcher finds out what's in demand.
The planner determines what to supply.
We just need a plan, regardless if it works or not. We just need a plan. So they kind of want to get this burden off their chest that if we're throwing a bunch of money at them, that at least we're trying, but in reality they're really not getting anything. So
maybe accountability versus no accountability. Searchers are accountable for their actions and planners.
because they're often members of the community.
Homegrown solutions and homegrown leaders. The best thing I would say is to understand aid and how all this, where this lost money goes, how it gets lost. You kind of have to be there in the system. You have to go there and do that. And I can understand why Easterly it has said that. Why do we still have malaria anywhere in the world? Or malnutrition, you can ask that question, or diabetes. Is this because we haven't done the science and there's scientific questions to answer? Well, then why are we spending, how much money do we spend on malaria research a year? How much of that money is getting wasted?
It's not all of it because Easterly does mention several programs that were funded by aid that were effective, that he considered effective at least.
Okay, yeah. Let's ask about delivery of goods. Why does diabetes exist on a reservation?
Native food systems are no longer what they used to be.
and price of produce.
And the price of produce on top of that. It's a cultural, it's mixture. It's a cultural issue in that case. It's delivery issue and it's an education issue. Go back to malaria. Is it a goods delivery issue?
It is a goods issue too, just 'cause, like, really stresses the point how the nets aren't even delivered, or the 12-cent medicines.
You can get so many medicines there everywhere from malaria or any other problems.
Can everyone do that?
Oh, it's so easy. It's super available. And there's a lot of dirt roads, there's trucks. I would imagine that a majority, at least in that place, a majority of people, it's not, security's not an issue. I think, that's one of the safest places in the country. In some of the other states where security is an issue, I could imagine that being a lot more difficult.
The minute a mother suspects cerebral malaria in Sonambulay, the only place to go is Bamako, where she's gonna get the right medicine and just get it right away. She has to have the money and she has to go on a motorbike. She'll get there in 2 hours. That's plenty of time. But if she doesn't have the money, she'll have to take a bus and that takes 9 hours. And that's on the edge of being enough time. Yeah, so it's money, yeah. If AID understood this, and other countries, and World Bank, and WHO, maybe they would stop putting the money into malaria research.
And what are we researching? We fully understand what's going on, right? And we,
Yeah.
Vaccination or something.
Some people are spending a lot of money trying to genetically manipulate these clothes so that they can't cure malaria. As a basic scientist, I can understand it's intellectually interesting. But if we're talking about people dying and spending money and contributing to poverty and contributing to malnutrition, if you have malaria, not cerebral, but recurring malaria, you can't go take care of your crops, you can't take care of your kids. It has a snowball effect.
You have to take it at a specific time to actually kill the malaria, and most people don't. It's really hard to judge what time without a lab, and most African villages don't really have a lab somebody can do blood smears with, so.
What would Aite say to these students?
I thought Aite promoted the homegrown thing a lot more than Easterly. We still felt like foreign aid was needed, just done differently. And Aite more was about, like, the villagers will do it themselves.
But he also said, like, it needs to come from within the community, but in order for them to get their projects off the ground, the funding's gonna have to come from, or to at least start off the projects or whatever there.
Maybe. The students made this diagram, and other students and I went and told the story.
Is that what you guys did with the village to help them solve the malaria problem, was educate?
That's the first thing we did. Then they started using bed nets, and they figured out how to fix them.
So when they were originally given the bed nets, they weren't told?
No, I mean, there were times, I suppose, when they did.
So why isn't education a component of delivering?
Because that's harder, more time consuming.
You actually have to talk to people.
On your research paper, I'm going to watch for how you incorporate some kind of participatory activity. You might want to start out with a participatory diagram called just a history, draw a line. And then I might ask questions of when was this village formed? When was this village initiated? So that would be the beginning of the village. Then ask appropriate questions about, was there a drought, or was there, what would be some other things?
Movements.
You notice there's circles and complex diagrams, and this one is more linear. And this is a final example of a participatory diagram that Vicki Turley imagined would be a way to teach or to learn about what are the nutritional components of a diet, a healthy diet in Sonambulay, that are available at different times of years. What kind of things you could do to generate money. So one of the first things they said was, well, we'll sell our chickens. I'm not good at making a chicken. Don't worry about. That's a very bad chicken. It doesn't look like the ones there.
Not sure how we should diagnose this.
So that's something to keep in mind as well.
think it's almost like two separate issues right now we're dealing. We need something to help them in the short term, and then
Yeah.
be thinking of something for long term that would help alleviate the situation in the future.
So for immediate solutions,
Maybe trade some goods within the town, or set up a system with one of the department stores in one of the bigger cities to purchase their goods from them. That way they'd have money to actually, supplement their food needs.
There's a whole wide array of things that have been looked into to alleviate the dietary problem in the children.
Peanuts are another source, so peanuts and milk. Milk is the best option, or meat.
Which is sort of
It's like
out of the
out of the question right now. But if you get the insect farming going, then chickens will be more in the question. There's the short term.
Exactly, that's what we looked at, immediate and long term.
If you add insects to the diet of chickens, how long before you're going to get good productivity? You might even be able to harvest eggs. But remembering eggs are an odd food. They're very strange. They don't eat eggs.
The insect farming sounds brilliant to me. I don't think we visited that. Something that should definitely be given, at least here at MSU, some trial and error sort of research.
And so we just made our holistic circle around access to food production, which means like the ability to grow food. Instead of coming up with like their needs, because we don't know their needs, we came up with questions.
We figured one way to go about figuring out what they need is to ask them, and then we thought, since we want to solve this problem using the holistic method, we'd break the questions, like use the holistic method to create questions that we think would help them. One thing that Mallory talked about that would be interesting is to sort of break it into demographics of like children versus like, their grandparents, especially when it comes to like traditional food, which they may have lost through.
Instead of waiting for the elder, or not elders, I guess you just call them the ranchers, to die and pass away, educate their children using a native science center that's in place on the Wind River Reservation. So educate them in traditional knowledge of the native peoples and kind of general information of, I guess, the cultural identity of the native peoples.
A lot of time actually not really brainstorming, but just thinking about like integration and also ways that I need to be educated going into meetings with folks in Northern Cheyenne. Talked about some good ways to prepare to understand some of the issues, and then also looking at the holistic process, how a project that roughly looks like that header, but it'll change, can reflect on kind of the holism of seeing like, well, maybe media and education about natives off the reservation can be used as a tool to address issues of quality of life, futures, etc. But using those kind of learning strategies off the reservation as tools and resources to promote kind of a way of life. So it was more of just a brainstorm of ways of working to make sure participatory processes are really integrated.